Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wioya. Chapter 476. Descent of the Heavenly Demon. Part 1. Swish. What on earth is going on? Mok Gon's avatar wearing the tiger skin couldn't hide his bewilderment. This body was arguably the finest among all the avatars. Hyukyoung-jae, known as the first sword of the Wanderers, the pinnacle of the previous generation's martial world. He was known to have no rival with the sword in the north, but one day he suddenly disappeared, a peerless master. It was no exaggeration to say he was the best except for the main body, but to not only be unable to approach but to only realize after being cut with such an avatar's body. How? How already? What was even more incredible was his appearance. It was a distance that would take at least 15 days riding a horse without rest, so how could he appear here already? It was an incomprehensible speed. Kill him. The avatar Hyukyoung-jae sent his thoughts to the other two avatars. Whatever happened, they had to kill him here. You bastard! How dare you! As soon as the avatar Hyukyoung-jae's thoughts fell, the two Mok Gon avatars simultaneously flew their forms like lightning. However, swoosh, 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 swoosh. Between the two avatars rushing at incredible speed, black lines drew trajectories in all directions like meteors in the night sky. Then their approaching bodies were split into dozens, hundreds of pieces. The three eyes of the avatar Hyukyoung-jae trembled. To think he would instantly cut down two avatars whose realms could only be raised to the profound realm due to the limits of their physical body's qualities? This guy had become much stronger than at the ruined castle's death forest. Chongryeong. Mok Jaehyung, who had instantly cut the two Mok Gon avatars into pieces of meat, embraced the staggering Chongryeong. Mortal! Jungseong! Chongryeong hugged Mok Jaehyung and cried. She had come this far trusting him, but her mind had been constantly filled with worry for him. But when she saw his face, the tears she had been holding back poured out. Being a vengeful spirit, blood tears flowed, and Mok Jaehyung wiped her tears with a gentle smile and showed her something. It was Sun Yun, her unique weapon. Sun Yun. This? Before he could finish speaking, the avatar Hyukyoung-jae with his arm cut off was seen forming a hand seal towards Mok Jaehyung and chanting something. At that moment, Mok Jaehyung's eyes flashed. Then, splash. Ku. Black blood gushed from Hyukyoung-jae's mouth as he was forming the hand seal. Hyukyoung-jae, who had spurted blood like a fountain, clutched his chest where his heart was with shocked eyes. A sharp sword piercing his chest. Though invisible, the sword had torn his heart to shreds. The pain was indescribable, and looking at him, Mok Jaehyung spoke with cold eyes. The supreme void sealing reversal technique no longer works. Ku. Ku. You. The price for making her shed tears. It's death. You bastard. Disappear. Mok Jaehyung lightly moved his sword energy-imbued fingers towards the avatar. Then sharp sword energy enveloped Hyukyoung-jae's body as he was forming the hand seal, and then swoosh, 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 swoosh. His body simply exploded. It was the price for being cut more finely than the other avatars. As the avatar who prided himself as the strongest turned to dust and died, Mok Jaehyung was about to say something to Chongryeong as if he had been waiting. However. Swish. Mok Jaehyung gently stroked her head as she lost consciousness due to extreme spiritual energy loss. She had come all this way without rest and endured with the utmost determination to stop Mok Gon, but it seemed her tension had eased with Mok Jaehyung's appearance. While holding her and stroking her head, Mok Jaehyung looked down at the 10,000 great mountains. Then, poof. He flew his form somewhere. It was the peak where Jong Hyun-mun, the Righteous Alliance leader, and his subordinates were battling. Jong Hyun-mun, who had opened his three eyes and exerted power comparable to the life and death realm beyond the profound realm, was truly invincible. Thud. Boom, 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 boom. Cuff. Seop Chun, who had been knocked back by a single strike, spat blood and looked at Zhang Haiyan with blurry eyes. It was an unbelievable result despite the joint attack of two supreme masters of the transformation realm, one supreme master with matchless great ability comparable to them, vengeful spirits, and themselves. The vengeful spirit Haiyun was on the verge of disappearing with his spirit limbs torn off, and Guiyang Sao, the master of poison techniques, had his abdomen pierced and was dying after just 10 moves, seemingly considered the most troublesome from the start. Even Jia Jiamzhong and Ma Are Haiyan, who were barely holding on, were not much different. Huff. Huff. Cough, cough. Damn bastard. Covered in blood, they were barely standing while staggering, in a state where it wouldn't be strange if they collapsed at any moment. What was more shocking was that despite being prepared to die together with the enemy, they had only managed to inflict a few scratches. This was a monster that couldn't be dealt with in any way. Even if he was one of the 7 heavens at the pinnacle of the current martial world, wasn't this too much? Step, step. Annoying things. Did you vermin really think you could stop me? I'll tear all your limbs. Flinch. It was at that moment. Zhang Haiyan, who had been approaching them, suddenly stopped and looked up. As they were wondering why he was acting like that, Zhang Haiyan suddenly uttered incomprehensible words with a deeply furrowed expression. How are you already? Boom. Before he could finish speaking, something fell from the sky onto where Zhang Haiyan was, and with it, the ground split, debris flew up, and the view was obscured by a cloud of dust. What's going on? As they were all bewildered by this sudden event, hiss. Then the dust that had been obscuring the view dispersed on its own, revealing someone. The moment they saw that someone holding the blurry spirit body of Chang Ryan, Siep Chen shouted at the top of his lungs with reddened eyes. My lord! It was none other than Mok Jiangyun. At the appearance of their long-awaited lord, all the subordinates, including Siep Chen, brightened up. Ah! But as the dust completely cleared, their joyful eyes widened. This was because there was a large hole where Mok Jiangyun was standing, and at his feet, Zhang Haiyan's head and body were completely crushed. It was as if his body had been flattened by tremendous pressure. Ah! Ma Are Haiyan showed even dejection as if he was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe that an opponent who had barely been scratched even when they fought with their lives in a joint attack had ended up like this with just one strike. It felt embarrassing to even call him a monster anymore. He was truly a god of martial arts descended to the mortal world. Whoosh! Clang, 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 clang. A faintly green staff and a sword imbued with flames clashed about 10 times in an instant. The green staff that didn't even get a scratch despite clashing with the flame-imbued sword was the dog-beating staff, the sacred object of the Beggars sect. Hong Wensuk, the leader of the Beggars sect, and Li Jiyom, the Corpse Blood Valley master, were exchanging techniques without giving an inch, leaving no openings, to the extent that no one around could approach. Every time these two supreme masters clashed, exclamations of admiration flowed from all around. Is this a battle between Transformation Realm masters? It's incredible. I heard that Leader Hong is comparable to the 8 stars, the highest in the current martial world, but who on earth is that one-armed swordsman? To hold out like that against the Corpse Blood Valley master. That old beggar is no pushover either. The Righteous Alliance and former Heaven and Earth Society warriors surrounded them in a circle, watching as if observing a duel. The balance of the battle, which seemed like it would continue for a long time, began to shift slightly due to the Beggar sect leader's change in technique. Dog beating staff technique, 9th form, pressed down the dog's head. As the dog beating staff moved dazzlingly, aiming for his neck, Li Jiyom tried to deflect it using the pear blossom grafting technique. But at that moment, subduing Dragon 18 Palms, 2nd form, Dragon Battle in the Wild. The dog beating staff technique was a feint. The moment he deflected the staff with his sword, Hong Wensuk's powerful left palm strike aimed for Li Jiyom's left shoulder. Normally, he would have raised his left arm to block this, but having lost his left arm in the battle with the Secret Society executive, he couldn't do so. Bang! Kook! It was his unfamiliarity with having lost his left arm that allowed this opening. Li Jiyong's form was pushed back about 5 steps after being hit on the left shoulder by the palm technique. Thanks to taking a direct hit, his body momentarily froze due to the palm force. Not missing this moment, Hong Won-suk let go of the dog-beating staff, jumped high, and tried to fly his form towards him. Subduing Dragon 18 Palms, first form, flying dragon in the sky. With a momentum like a powerful dragon flying in, Li Jiyong tried to block it without fully dissipating the palm force in his shoulder. It was at that moment that someone intervened. It was Wangbo Song, the head of the Wangbo clan. Oh no! Flustered by the sudden intervention as he was about to finish the fight, Hong Won-suk, the beggar sect leader, hurriedly directed both palms towards the ground to dissipate the palm force. Boom! The ground caved in due to his palm force, creating a large hole. Hong Won-suk, who rose from the hole, shouted with an angry voice, "What is the meaning of this? Are you trying to protect the enemy now? Didn't I ask you to pause the battle for a moment? Pause the battle? Don't tell me you're going to believe what that guy is saying?" The person Hong Won-suk pointed at was none other than Ma Qiuqian. He was kneeling with both knees on the ground and his hands behind his back, as if showing no intention to fight. He is a person from the Yun Moksword sect. Huh. How can you be so naive? Have you forgotten that he appeared together with a master from the Heaven and Earth Society? This is clearly a trap. To call it a trap, didn't you also find it strange, leader? Even with information and justification, this war was carried out too one-sidedly. War is bound to be one-sided in some way. How can the leader of the Silent Strides so easily believe the words of a traitor? Then how do you explain the token and the secret message tube? At Wangbo Song's outcry, Hong Won-suk, the beggar sect leader, snorted and said, "Even if he had the Silent Strides token, how do you know they didn't take it from him when they caught the spy? Why are you acting like this?" At these words, Wangbo Song clicked his tongue. It seemed no matter what he said, it wouldn't get through. The war was already well underway, and the situation was favorable, so he probably wouldn't listen to a word he said, worried about morale dropping. Just then, Ma Qiuqian shouted, "I have not betrayed the righteous faction. I just struggled to survive." It was also I who sent the information about the internal rebellion in the Heaven and Earth Society, and later informed about a third organization intervening in that rebellion. How can you be so swayed by them? What? Who's being swayed by what? This is clearly a setup created by a third organization. Don't you find it too strange? No matter how strong the Heaven and Earth Society is, why suddenly form an alliance with the Evil Alliance and attack? Do you really not know? They want the Righteous Alliance, the Evil Alliance, and the Heaven and Earth Society to fight each other to mutual destruction. Murmur, murmur. At Ma Qiuqian's outcry, there was a stir here and there. This was because, although they had followed the decisions of their sect leaders, they too had found it strange how hastily the war was progressing, and despite overwhelming the enemy numerically and in strength, they suddenly formed an alliance with the Evil Alliance. Poof. You bastard. You're trying to lower our troops' morale with this ridiculous scheme. Just then, Gu Qiuljia, the sect leader of the Huashan sect who was nearby, appeared and seemed to decide he couldn't let this continue after hearing Ma Qiuqian's outcry. Flinch. But as Gu Qiuljia was about to fly his form towards him, he stopped and looked at his sword with a bewildered expression. What's this? Whoa. The Huashan sect's famous sword, the purple sky sword, that he was holding was trembling and resonating. It wasn't just his sword. Tremble, tremble. What's going on? Why are the swords suddenly? The swords held by the swordsmen around were trembling as if they were alive. Then something unbelievable happened before their eyes. The swords held by swordsmen who died during the war or swords that had lost their masters suddenly began to float in the air. Chapter 477. Descent of the Heavenly Demon. Part 2. Jia Jiamzhong. At Mok Jianun's call, Jia Jiamzhong, the fallen monk subduing demon, approached bewildered. He didn't understand why he was suddenly being called. As he was puzzled, Mok Jiangun handed over Chang Ryong, whom he had been holding, and said, "Take care of her." Cough, cough. Asking this damn monk who used to beat up wandering spirits to take care of a vengeful spirit. "I trust you. So protect her." At Mok Jiangun's short but weighty order, Jia Jiamzhong hesitated for a moment, then respectfully extended both arms and answered, "I receive your command." Usually, even when hearing Mok Jiangun's orders, he would have answered without hesitation. Always saying master, master, but never showing proper respect. Seeing him show proper respect for the first time, Siap Chun's eyes widened. Is the sun rising from the west? Did he just say he receives the command? At Siap Chun's sneer, the fallen monk Jia Jiamzhong smacked his lips and said, "You. Can't you feel it? What do you mean? Never mind. No, if you asked something, shouldn't you give a proper answer?" Leaving the frustrated Siap Chun behind, Jia Jiamzhong looked at Mok Jiangun. The last time he saw him was in the bamboo forest of the ruined old castle. Even then, unlike when they first met, he was gradually developing the qualities of a leader, moving from an unrestrained and emotionless feeling. But now, Mok Jiangun was different. An indescribable dignity as an absolute being enveloped him. Because of this, although deep in his heart he had not been able to acknowledge him, thinking his fate was tied to something dirty, now he had no choice but to recognize him as his true lord. Is this what it means to be a true vessel to lead all people? It even evoked a strange emotion to have witnessed this change up close. Meanwhile, Mok Jiangun approached Guyong Sao, the 8-poisoned snake master, who had collapsed with his abdomen pierced. He placed his hand on Guyong Sao's abdomen and formed a hand seal. Thud. 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 Then Guyong Sao's body trembled, the color returned to his pale face, and soon his breathing became regular. Ah! Mok Jiangun's subordinates, who had thought there was no hope due to the severity of the injury, couldn't hide their surprise. Regardless, Mok Jiangun next approached the vengeful spirit Haiyun, who was close to disappearing with his limbs cut off, and said, "I owe you a debt." At those words, the vengeful spirit Haiyun smiled painfully and replied, "Your Excellency's judgment was correct. This body was inadequate, and even as a vengeful spirit, I couldn't repay the resentment of failing to protect my lord. Could you perhaps ease that resentment? If that's enough, it will be enough. I heard you two must settle accounts with that person." "I see. So he too was entangled with Mok Gon by a bad relationship. It was truly an extraordinary coincidence." Mok Jiangun then lightly patted the vengeful spirit Haiyun's shoulder and turned around. Then he said to his subordinates, "You've worked hard. Leave the rest to me and guard this place until I finish things up." An order close to a request. Hearing this, a strange light flickered in the eyes of Siap Chun, Jia Jiamzhong, and Ma Are Haiyan. They felt something stirring deep in their hearts. At this, the three people simultaneously knelt on one knee and raised their clasped hands towards Mok Jiangun in a respectful gesture. Loyalty. Mok Jiangun looked at them with a faint smile, then erased it and slowly began to float. The three people watched this scene with puzzlement. The three major factions, the former Heaven and Earth Society, the Righteous Alliance, and the Evil Alliance, were already intertwined and killing each other, so what could he do in this situation? Even though Mok Jiangun had become stronger, it was a difficult situation to do something alone. Of course, just his appearance would boost the morale of their allies, but that alone was not enough to stop this war. It was then. Rattle, rattle, rattle. The sound of something shaking strongly was heard. Ma Are Haiyan's eyes saw swords that had lost their owners trembling. It wasn't happening to just one sword. All the sword handles on the ground, even the weapons, trembled as if resonating with something, and then, float. The swords began to float in the air. As dozens of swords on the peak floated up simultaneously, not just one, Siap Chun's mouth fell open. Are you going to use sword energy with all these swords?" At his exclamation, Jia Jiamzhong, holding Chang Ryong, snorted and said, "Are your eyes knotholes?" "What? What does that look like to you? That. This is. Siep Chun was at a loss for words at the scene unfolding before his eyes. It wasn't happening just on the peak where they were. Weapons like swords and sabers that had lost their owners or belonged to warriors were slowly rising from the peaks and mountainsides all over the 10,000 great mountains where the war was taking place. It was truly a spectacular sight. The swords. No, the weapons are floating. What on earth is going on? Bewildered voices erupted from here and there on the peak. The warriors of the three major factions who had been fiercely confronting and fighting each other could only stare blankly at the rising weapons. It was no different for the leaders and executives leading the three major factions. They too had their attention momentarily captured by the weapons rising in all directions. Float. Not understanding what was happening, it was nothing short of a strange phenomenon. Hong Wunsuk, the beggar sect leader, clicked his tongue and spoke, "Huh. Weapons floating on their own, what on earth is this strange occurrence? Primordial Heavenly Lord. Even this poor Taoist has never seen such a sight before." Jin Sokja, the sect leader of the Qingqing sect, said this while looking at his own violently shaking sword. It felt as if the sword wanted to break free from his hand. "Tremble, tremble." Sect leader Jin. "The swords are responding to something. This is like..." Gu Qiolja, the sect leader of the Huashan sect, swallowed dry saliva as he looked at the trembling purple sky sword. Instinctively, he felt it. The swords were being drawn to the matchless power leading all swords. It was enough to shake even the hearts of the swordsmen. Meanwhile, there were two peerless masters engaged in an incredible battle, crossing back and forth over the peaks. Kuahahaha. They said your real combat experience had declined, but that's not entirely true. Clang, 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 clang. They were Hang Sim, the unruly evil hegemon and one of the evil alliance leaders, and O Cheon Mu, the extreme sword master and leader of the spiritual sword sanctuary, both among the seven heavens at the pinnacle of the current martial world. Thanks to Mok Jiangun, O Cheon Mu, who had honed his sword way and sword extreme through more real combat experience, was engaging in close combat with Hang Sim without giving an inch. Clang, 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 clang. Boom, 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 boom. Every time these two Grand Master-level peerless experts clashed swords, the surroundings were shattered by the aftershocks, and some even died from the wind pressure of their sword energy. A single mistake could cost one's life in a battle between Grand Masters. That's why all the nerves of the two masters were focused solely on their opponent. Strong. Truly strong. Kuhahahat. Yes. This is the kind of battle I've been longing for. The higher one's martial arts reach, the harder it is to find a worthy opponent. Although they met as enemies, they couldn't help but become increasingly immersed in this battle, having found an opponent to match their skills. However, their battle, which seemed unstoppable, came to a sudden halt. Flinch. The two peerless masters, who had been clashing their sword and saber with full force, stopped their techniques without exception, creating distance and turning their gaze somewhere. They were looking at the same place. It was towards the top of a peak in the 10,000 Great Mountains, where someone could be seen floating, perhaps using the void walking technique. O Cheon Mu recognized that someone at once. My lord? It was none other than Mok Jiangun. The Shadow Clan master Huan Yasian had said there was no reply even when he sent a messenger, but had he returned just in time, albeit a bit late? But more than that, what on earth is this? O Cheon Mu felt goosebumps all over his body. Sword? It felt as if Mok Jiangun's very existence had become a sword, and an unimaginable matchless power was encompassing everything, resonating with the swords and drawing them in. Tremble, tremble. If even his own sword, which had completely assimilated with his sword heart after reaching the sword way and sword extreme, was trembling in his hand, does this mean he had transcended realms once again? Huh? He wasn't the only one surprised. Hang Sim, the unruly evil hegemon, felt a shudder at the matchless power that could cover all directions. Drip, drip. Even his forehead, which hadn't sweated a drop while dueling with Mu, was now dripping with cold sweat. What on earth is that? Did such a monster exist in this world? The numerous swords rising due to the matchless power were truly a spectacular sight, and it was awe-inspiring that he could resonate with and move all these swords. Grip. Hang Sim, the unruly evil hegemon, tightly gripped his trembling right hand with his left. Then he dug his nails in to calm his excitement. It's hard to find a worthy opponent. But it's even harder to encounter an absolute being beyond that. Kuahahahat. As if trying to drive away the awe that had entered deep into his heart, Hang Sim burst into a thunderous laugh. Then he kicked off the air, using the void-stepping technique to fly towards Mok Jiangun, who was floating in the air. Hang Sim! Mu shouted, but he was no longer the object of Hang Sim's interest. With such a delicious prey before his eyes, one he might never see again in his lifetime, how could he hesitate? Hang Sim tried to unleash his ultimate technique, gathering all his power towards Mok Jiangun. However, swish! Mok Jiangun, who had indifferently glanced at the approaching Hang Sim once, lightly waved his hand, and swoosh, 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 swoosh. Hang Sim's pupils trembled as he was using the void-stepping technique. This was because about 100 of the numerous swords that had been floating in the air all flew towards him at once. He's handling this many swords simultaneously? Is this even possible in reality? His shock was short-lived. Hap. Hang Sim unleashed a tyrannical saber technique to counter this. His saber, emitting saber energy equivalent to 5 Jang, fiercely displayed saber techniques to respond to the incoming swords, but clang, 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 clang. Damn it. The energy carried by the swords exceeded his expectations. Despite gritting his teeth and unleashing his saber techniques, he couldn't withstand the momentum of the sword energy swords that endlessly circulated and crashed like waves, and was swept away. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Cuff. The warriors of the 3 major factions watching this scene were so shocked they lost their words. This can't be. The unruly evil hegemon Hang Sim? Hang Sim, the strongest of the evil alliance and one of the 7 heavens, was swept away by the wave of swords in an instant without even being able to approach. What on earth is the identity of that monster? The attention of everyone who had been fighting so fiercely naturally turned to the being at the center of the thousands of swords covering the sky. Whoosh! Mok Jiangun, who had been scanning them with indifferent eyes, then opened his mouth. I am the heavenly demon. The brilliant flame that leads all demons and guides everything into darkness. Chapter 478. Descent of the Heavenly Demon. Part 3. Thousands of swords and weapons covering the sky of the 10,000 great mountains. The warriors of the 3 major factions, who until just moments ago had been focused solely on killing their opponents, couldn't take their eyes off the sky, awed by this tremendous display. Even a single sword moving on its own would be considered a marvel of sword energy control technique, but this scene was beyond imagination. Then a voice echoed in their ears like a reverberation. I am the heavenly demon. The brilliant flame that leads all demons and guides everything into darkness. Heavenly demon? Did he just say heavenly demon? There was a stir throughout the 10,000 great mountains. The name that had shaken the martial world most recently was precisely the heavenly demon. The domineering steps that collapsed the Shaolin Temple's 108 Arhat formation in his first appearance. The fortress that single-handedly brought down and sealed off the Sichuan Tang family, notorious for their poisons and assassination techniques throughout both the righteous and evil factions of the martial world. The submission of the spiritual sword sanctuary and its leader Mu, one of the current pinnacles of the martial world, considered the best among neutral forces not belonging to either the righteous or evil factions. With these achievements alone, he had gained the title of Heaven, referring to the pinnacle of the martial world, in the shortest time in martial arts history. This alone would be considered remarkable, but his groundbreaking actions didn't end there. Heaven and Earth Society. He had brought down the Heaven and Earth Society, one of the martial organizations called the three major powers that had maintained a delicate balance, and even made them his subordinates. This became the decisive turning point. Although there was justification that there had been friction with the two forces belonging to the righteous alliance from the beginning, his actions were relentless. Watching this progress, like an unstoppable charge, made them anxious that his blade might be at their throats at any moment. All of this became the real catalyst that moved them. What on earth is he made of? A monster. A real monster. Does his inner energy spring forth infinitely or something? Profound inner energy that could control thousands of weapons with energy while still communicating his will to them. It was truly beyond imagination. Because of their positions as righteous or evil, they wanted to deny it somehow, but inwardly they had to acknowledge it. That being was the true pinnacle of the current martial world. Having already seen the unruly evil hegemon Hang Sim, one of the seven heavens, defeated before their eyes, this being's martial arts were on a completely different level. Whoosh! There's a saying that one rider is worth 1,000. It means one person can handle 1,000 cavalry, but this guy seemed poised to take on all these martial artists alone, surpassing even that. How on earth can we stop this? While the enemies were so fearful of his presence, the former Heaven and Earth Society warriors under Mok Jayanun were different. Their morale had been falling as they fought against the overwhelming enemy forces, but the moment they saw the overwhelming majesty of their lord, their fighting spirit soared and cheers erupted. Wah! The thunderous cries of the warriors echoed throughout the 10,000 great mountains. This made the blood of all allies boil. Thud. Ho Tae Gang, the king of destruction, put down his axe on the ground, unable to contain his excitement. I've been waiting for this moment. The appearance of an absolute being in whom he could believe and follow completely. Until now, the Heaven and Earth Society had been one of the three major powers, but they had always had to suppress this boiling blood while maintaining that balance. It wasn't just him. Bright Blade King Sun Yun's complexion also gradually deepened as if responding to Mok Jayanun's majesty and the rising morale of their allies. He was just a young boy we brought to continue the Moonvein lineage. That boy had become an absolute being who made everyone fear him and feel awe. He was trembling with excitement. Whoosh! The Holy Fire Priestess, her granddaughter Yi Sang-ah, and her lover Oh Yun-woo, who had climbed to a mountain peak at the rear of the battlefield leading the elderly, couldn't help but shudder. Thud. Grandmother. When the Holy Fire Priestess suddenly knelt down, Yi Sang-ah, who was supporting her, was bewildered and tried to help her up again. No. But she refused, saying she was fine. Then, with reddened eyes, she looked at Mok Jayanun in the sky, clasped her hands to her chest, and opened her mouth. The brilliant flame that guides into darkness has descended upon the world. He is truly a god. Then she closed her eyes and recited reverently. This body burns in the sacred fire, with no attachment to life or death. On the path I wish to go, I illuminate the light, leaving joy and sorrow as mere dust. How pitiful are the many troubled mortals. A scripture. It was a scripture of the Fire Faith Order. As she recited this, Yi Sang-ah and Oh Yun-woo beside her also knelt down. And like the Holy Fire Priestess, they crossed their hands on their chests and reverently recited the scripture towards Mok Jayanun, who was spreading thousands of weapons like wings. This body burns in the sacred fire, with no attachment to life or death. On the path I wish to go, I illuminate the light, leaving joy and sorrow as mere dust. How pitiful are the many troubled mortals. It wasn't just the two of them reciting. As hundreds of cult members gathered in the Heaven and Earth Society recited the scripture, it spread reverently. Along with this, black flames began to flicker and burn from the numerous weapons around Mok Jayanun. Whoosh! Thousands of weapons flickering with black flames. It was a sight incomparable to when the swords had merely floated. Shudder. How can this be? Like others, Sate of the Hangshan sect, who had been looking up with eyes full of fear, darkened her face and sat down in meditation. Then she put her palms together and chanted a sutra. Amma Buddha. As the black flame soared, the demonic energy spreading from the sky shook her righteous thoughts. She had no choice but to chant sutras to hold on to them. She wasn't the only one affected like this. The Taoist sects also chanted the primordial heavenly Lord, gathering their thoughts as they were pressed down by the demonic energy that was close to darkness itself. Damn it. What should we do? Why are you asking me that? Even the alliance leader ended up like that. How can we fight such a monster? Those black flames. They seem to be hard energy. And not just simple hard energy, but containing demonic energy. That wasn't human. How could a human body imbue thousands of weapons with hard energy? It was so overwhelming that they couldn't help but be gripped by fear. Lim Mugun, the Red Evil Alliance leader of the Evil Alliance, clicked his tongue with a distorted expression. This is wrong. That's not a being that humans can handle. With just that one being, the concept of military strength had already become meaningless. Pressed down by this transcendent power, he no longer even wanted to continue the war. Just then, Mok Jiangun's voice echoed again. Those who have invaded my domain, swayed by foolish machinations. Kook. People hear and they're covered their ears at the voice that resonated like a lion's roar. Is it possible to have this much in one's inner energy after displaying such mastery of sword energy control and even raising heart energy? Lim Mugun was truly afraid of that being. This was the case not just for him, but for most gathered here. As everyone was tense, Mok Jiangun's voice continued to flow. The price for this should rightfully be death, but as it was done out of fear towards the absolute being leading all demons and out of ignorance due to petty machinations, I shall bestow a sliver of mercy. Mercy? Did he just say he would bestow mercy? At these words ringing in their ears, the faces of the Righteous Alliance executives and the Evil Alliance leaders and masters twisted with humiliation. They were not waging a defensive battle. They had gathered to annihilate these people under the pretext of upholding justice and eliminating a seed that would pose a danger to the martial world in the future. But now he's saying he'll bestow mercy on them who had invaded? It was utterly insulting. However, not a single person could refute these words. This was the same for the elders, senior members, and top masters of each sect. Grip. How could this be? This is close to a great disaster. To submit to the momentum of just one person. This cannot be. We can't retreat. If we retreat here, future generations will laugh at us. We should fight even if it leads to the worst outcome. No one could carelessly open their lips. They couldn't irresponsibly bring about the terrible consequences they imagined in their minds. Grind. Though he tried not to show it, Mok Yuchion bit his lip hard at the sight of the Righteous Alliance warriors and pillars filled with terror and fear. The war he had tried so hard to prevent, even at the cost of sacrificing himself to persuade the higher-ups of the Righteous Alliance, was now being ended by that guy with power alone. You, what on earth? Mok Yuchion slumped to the ground, dejected. Any competitive spirit or desire to surpass him had disappeared. Even during the internal conflict of the Heaven and Earth Society, he thought he had reached an unreachable realm, but now he had become like a star in the sky. He didn't know anymore. Perhaps now he should just be satisfied that the three major powers didn't clash. It was at that moment. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, a burst of laughter erupted from somewhere. At this sudden laughter, the attention of those looking at Mok Jiangun turned towards it. There, they saw someone else floating in the sky. While those from the Evil Alliance couldn't recognize who he was, it was different for the Righteous Alliance side. Clan head Danmok? It was Danmok Inho, the head of the Danmok clan. The Righteous Alliance elders and executives couldn't hide their surprise at his appearance as he displayed the void walking technique. This was because, although he was the head of a clan, his martial arts weren't that high. Everyone was puzzled to see him displaying the void walking technique, considered the extreme of lightness skills, when they had known him to be just a mature supreme expert. But seemingly unconcerned with their gazes. Thud, thud, thud. Soon, a third eye opened on Danmok Inho's forehead. What on earth is that on his forehead? And I? There was a stir here and there at his appearance. Regardless, Dan Mok-In-ho snorted and then opened his mouth. I was going to enjoy watching foolish humans harm each other and approach destruction, but you just had to ruin that fun. What on earth is he saying? Why is the head of the Dan Mok clan saying such things? Rumble. As everyone was puzzled, those on the forward mountain peaks noticed something strange. The ground was shaking even though the war had temporarily stopped due to Mok Jaeongun's appearance. Why is the earth suddenly shaking? Among those wondering, someone's eyes widened to the point of tearing as they shouted. Look over there. What on earth is that? At someone's shout, all eyes in the vicinity turned in that direction. Black somethings marching forward, filling the horizon in front of the 10,000 great mountains. The eyes of those looking at them trembled. They weren't human. Those things, too grotesque to be called beasts, were undoubtedly monsters. How can there be so many? Rumble. The shaking of the earth intensified, and the sound grew louder. Faced with the enormous number of monsters endlessly pouring in, filling the horizon, the warriors of the three major factions entangled at the front all took steps back with hardened expressions. How could so many monsters be surging to a place like this? Fear and terror are contagious. The overwhelmingly vast number of evil spirits and monsters soon became visible even from most of the peaks in the 10,000 great mountains. The resulting confusion and commotion was no less than that caused by Mok Jaeongun's appearance. This can't be. What kind of strange phenomenon is this? How could these strange beings, or rather evil spirits and monsters, that one might see once in a lifetime if at all, be surging forward in such a large group? Everyone was dumbfounded, overwhelmed by their enormous numbers. Seeing their expressions, Dan Mok-In-ho raised the corner of his mouth with a face full of madness. Yes. That's the face you insignificant beings should make. He had wanted to see them fight each other more and self-destruct, but it didn't matter now. Given this situation, he could first erase the martial world with a calamity incomparable to the previous one, then wipe out the human seed. This is what despair looks like. Swish. Dan Mok-In-ho turned his head to glare at Mok Jaeongun. Although the guy's power far exceeded his expectations, those thousands of sword energy blades were just for show, mere bluster. No matter how much mastery over space, resonance with swords, and matchless capability one had, it was virtually impossible to handle so many swords simultaneously. Swish, 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 swish. It was at that moment. The thousands of swords filling the sky, aimed at the base of the 10,000 great mountains, changed their formation and then turned towards the evil spirits and monsters surging towards the front of the 10,000 great mountains. Seeing this, Dan Mok-In-ho furrowed his brow and shouted at Mok Jaeongun. What on earth are you trying to do? Even for you, this is reckless. It's absolutely nothing I can't do. What? Heavenly void bright light, 8 immortal sword competition. No sooner had those words ended. From the tips of the thousands of weapons burning with demonic energy, sword energy bursts became black light streams and exploded forth. But that wasn't the end. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The light streams that burst forth split into 8 branches again in midair, and in an instant, the sky was covered with black light streams, no, a black meteor shower. The eyes of the evil spirits and monsters, marching forward filled with some unknown will, shook madly at the numerous black lights flying towards them, filling their front view. Chapter 479. Descent of the Heavenly Demon. Part 4. It was a sight that was hard to believe even with one's own eyes. The eyes of the warriors, who had been gripped by fear, overwhelmed by the countless evil spirits and monsters endlessly surging forward and filling the horizon, now flickered with black light. Whoosh! Black sword energy bursts flowed from thousands of weapons. Those light streams instantly covered the sky, becoming a black meteor shower stretching towards the evil spirits and monsters surging towards the 10,000 great mountains. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The meteor shower of sword energy bursts at incredible speed. The advancing evil spirits and monsters tried to change direction when they noticed this, but they couldn't due to their allies filling both sides and behind them. Roar. Growl. Finally, the black light streams crossing space struck the evil spirits and monsters directly. Boom, 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 boom. With this, the sword energy bursts pierced through the front lines of evil spirits and monsters, causing green and purple blood to burst out in all directions. Thousands of sword energy bursts split into 8 branches, becoming tens of thousands. The sword energy burst split the evil spirits and monsters with unstoppable momentum. Low-level fierce beasts and monsters were shattered to pieces, unable to withstand it, and even demon beast level and higher evil spirits and monsters were pushed back, unable to withstand the tremendous momentum of the demonic energy-infused sword energy bursts. At this amazing sight, cheers erupted. Wah! The morale of the warriors under the former Heaven and Earth Society couldn't help but soar at the world-changing, absolute majesty their lord displayed. These cheers soon led to another cry. A cry that emerged from someone's mouth spread throughout the 10,000 great mountains. Descent of the heavenly demon. All demons bow down. The heavenly demon has descended, and all demons prostrate themselves in reverence. Descent of the heavenly demon. All demons bow down. Descent of the heavenly demon. All demons bow down. Descent of the heavenly demon. All demons bow down. The warriors of the Righteous Alliance and Evil Alliance could only shrink back with hardened faces at this reverence for the heavenly demon echoing like a reverberation. Although the Righteous Alliance revered righteousness and chivalry, at this moment, they felt a shudder towards the demonic. Descent of the heavenly demon. All demons bow down. What on earth are we doing here? Babuda. The demonic that was only stirring has finally bloomed. Sate of the Hangshan sect spoke with a darkened face, her palms pressed together. At her words, Master of the Diansong sect asked, "What do you mean by that?" Sate. In a world divided only into white and black, right and wrong, the pure demonic intent, the demon, has awakened. In Buddhism, the pure evil called demon is something to be avoided even more than a deceitful mind. The same is true in Taoism. A third intent, the demonic, has been born in a world that was divided into right and wrong. The way of demons. The feared event had finally occurred. Descent of the heavenly demon. All demons bow down. The reverence towards the Lord of Demons echoing. It was binding together those who worshipped the demonic. Now they could only watch helplessly as the birth of the demonic, which the righteous and evil should have joined forces to prevent unconditionally, took place. The demonic is suppressing the inhuman beings, the demons. At this moment when demons are trying to annihilate humans, the righteous, evil, and demonic were standing looking in the same direction. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Boom, 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 boom. Wherever the black meteor shower touched, there was only destruction and death. The eyes of Danmok Inho, Mok Gon's avatar and the head of the Danmok clan, watching this, grew cold. How is such divine power possible with a human body? The spatial perception ability to handle thousands of weapons simultaneously and a matchless capability like an inexhaustible spring, no, like a great sea. This was not a realm possible for a mere human body. Could it be that he's regained his original power? He is an avatar. The king of demons. If he had regained his original power, all this might be possible, but looking at him with the 3 eyes, he was still human. There's no core. The absence of a core that should be present in a demonic clan. It was decisive evidence that he hadn't regained his former power. Grip. Danmok Inho's clenched fist tightened. Then does this mean he has reached the highest realm possible for a human? The life and death realm reached within the boundary of life and death is not the end. If one can achieve harmony with the 5 elements of great nature, one can reach the natural realm, which can be said to be the end. If that happens, one can draw energy from great nature, so there is no limit to inner energy. Did he consume a spirit beast? But then he said to another avatar, "You take that kind of thing." What? That's not what's important. He is utterly arrogant. Perhaps because he was the king of demons, but he tries to break all existing things. Such a person wouldn't go back on his word. Having thought only of him for over 100 years and being destined enemies, he could understand this. Then does this matchless capability possess a power close to infinite that even rivals the energy of great nature? Tremble. Kook. Kookuk. Kuahahaha. Eventually, Dan Mok In-ho burst into mad laughter. It truly inspires awe. You are undoubtedly a worthy archenemy to devote one's life to killing. Yes. If it were a fight that could be ended easily, it wouldn't be fun. This is just the beginning. And even your tremendous ultimate technique is not without weakness. Crack. At that moment, an anomaly occurred in the weapons emitting the sword energy bursts of the black meteor shower. The blades of the weapons began to break. Hiss. The fragments of the broken blades couldn't withstand the demonic energy and oxidized on the spot. The corner of Dan Mok In-ho's mouth curled up sinisterly. As expected, ordinary weapons cannot fully withstand his power. It would have been strange for ordinary weapons to withstand that sword energy burst that could crush and penetrate even evil spirits and monsters. Crack, 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 crack. Eventually, the weapons that couldn't withstand the demonic energy broke rapidly. In an instant, nearly half were broken, and the other weapons were cracking and splitting, looking like they would all break soon. Yes. That's the limit of that ultimate technique. And now is the chance. Poof. Dan Mok In-ho flew his form towards Mok Jayangan. Concentrating all his power on thousands of swords, he can't turn his attention elsewhere right now. The Righteous Alliance and Evil Alliance might not aim for his back, but I'm different. I am an enemy trying to annihilate humanity. I desperately wish for your death. Though inferior to other bodies, this is enough for you now. Whoa. Dan Mok In-ho extremely compressed his sword energy and concentrated it on his sword. Heaven sword technique, heaven defeating sword. Swoosh. His form rushing towards Mok Jayangan became one with the sword, and its tyrannical momentum seemed like it would cut through everything in existence. This was an ultimate technique created based on his method of concentrating all his power into a single point. It was only possible once with this body, but that didn't matter. With just this one chance, he could kill him. Clang. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Dan Mok In-ho's three pupils shook. Mok Jayangan still hadn't even turned his head. Yet somehow, a formless sword that appeared in midair created black lines, not only shattering his heaven-defeating sword but also cutting off his limbs in an instant. To have this much strength left here? With avatars. Is it impossible to do anything? A true monster. A monster that can't be dealt with unless it's the main body. His body, with its limbs cut off, was about to fall to the ground, spewing fresh blood. However, grip. His body floated up due to profound inner energy. Then his floating body was drawn towards Mok Jayangan. Meanwhile, the remaining thousands of weapons unleashing the heavenly void bright light, 8 immortal sword competition broke. Crack, 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 crack. Mok Jayangan aimed his sword energy-imbued fingers at the third eye of Dan Mok In-ho, whose limbs had been cut off and who had flown right in front of him. How long do you intend to hide? Main body. Show yourself now. At Mok Jayangan's direct question, the corner of Dan Mok In-ho's mouth twitched. Seeing this, Mok Jayangan was about to unleash his sword energy towards Dan Mok In-ho's third eye as if he had lost interest. Then, bulge. The blood vessels in the third eye bulged, and the voice changed. It was not by Yonghyun's will. How much do you think I estimated the capabilities of you, the Avatar, and humans in the plan I've been weaving for a long time? What? Through the Jiao Dragon Demon King's Human-Demon War and the First Great Calamity, we revised many strategies. Even the most insignificant and insect-like beings can't have their limits carelessly judged when cornered. Humanity will realize that the Human-Demon War and Great Calamity that occurred over hundreds of years were merely the beginning. Whoosh! As soon as those words ended, the front that had been obscured by the haze from the heavenly void bright light's aftermath gradually revealed itself. The corpses of numerous evil spirits and monsters were strewn about miserably. It seemed to be nearly tens of thousands. At this sight, the faces of the former Heaven and Earth Society warriors under Mok Jian'an, as well as the Righteous Alliance and Evil Alliance warriors, were about to brighten, but it didn't last long. Rumble. Once again, the 10,000 great mountains began to shake with vibrations. Shadows filling the horizon began to appear as the hazy smoke cleared. The faces of the warriors looking at this hardened. This can't be. How? How many are there? Countless evil spirits and monsters, too many to count, were approaching, trampling on the corpses of the dead monsters as they surged forward from beyond the horizon. Mok Jian'an's eyes narrowed as he looked at this. Suddenly, Mok Jian'an recalled the map of the Central Plains that Jin Yuren had drawn on the ground. A massive formation encompassing the entire Central Plains. Are all the evil spirits and monsters in the Central Plains gathering here? During the First Great Calamity, evil spirits and monsters throughout the Central Plains went berserk and tried to harm humans. And in the Second Great Calamity, the evil spirits and monsters were controlled by him. Not just going berserk, but with a clear purpose. It might be difficult for ordinary humans, but martial artists who have cultivated martial arts have the power to confront evil spirits and monsters. They were trying to slaughter all the martial artists gathered in the 10,000 Great Mountains. I need to kill the main body. It's certainly him controlling this technique. If he's not killed, there would be no choice but to continue an endless battle with the evil spirits and monsters. Swish! Mok Jian'an reached out towards his third eye. Now that most of the avatars have been destroyed, if he could trace the will, he should be able to find the location of the main body. Just as his hand was about to touch. Flinch! Suddenly, Mok Jian'an's hand stopped. Whoosh! Simultaneously, a tremendous wind pressure spread throughout the 10,000 Great Mountains as if a storm had hit. The wind was so strong it was difficult to maintain balance. Ugh! What kind of wind is this? The sudden gust of wind was not a simple natural phenomenon. At some point, they could tell. A huge shadow was being cast over the front of the 10,000 Great Mountains. And as the shadow gradually shrank, the incoming wind became as cold as if accompanied by a north wind, even causing frost to form all around. Crack, 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 crack. The cold wind pressing down on everything eventually brought despair. Flap. 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 Whoosh. A huge, pure white being accompanied by a storm that seemed capable of freezing everything with a single wing beat. It was a great pun larger than one of the peaks of the 10,000 Great Mountains.